All right. Let's see who the early arrivers are. We have Estorina, Latif. Folks are coming in all over the place, and we got them. They're coming in from everywhere. I think around the world, actually. We got folks from the folks in the government coming in. Welcome everybody. We'll get cooking. So we're just figuring out. We always do icebreakers here with Gov Brief. So the icebreaker is, what do you? Oh, let me make sure we can do the chat. We got to have the chat open. Need to do the chat, and I can do everyone from here, and then everybody can also chat to everyone. All right. So question is, where are you from, and did you grow up with Jerry Springer? So if you didn't hear, Jerry Springer died today, right? Is that what it is, Matt?
He did.
So did you grow up with Jerry Springer, and what was your experience there? Matt, you have an experience you were talking about. So you grew up with Springer. I did too, showing my age.
I did. Yeah. So in the Army, through basic training and through AIT, obviously AIT more than basic, during lunchtime at the chow hall, we were always able to watch Springer on the TV, and the entire chow hall was going, "Good, Jerry." We were always looking for the fights and everything. It was always a good time and a good camaraderie builder. So he will be missed. He was very entertaining.
And yes, I grew up. So I'm from Woodstock, Maryland, and I grew up with Jerry Springer. I wasn't a super huge fan because this is kind of a crazy, trashy show on purpose.
That's what made it great.
So there you go. So the question is, where are you from? Yes, Wanda says you'll be missed. New Jersey. Not a fan. Usually I'm asking another question about people from New Jersey because I happen to be this guy's fan. We were just talking about that too. I got to see 2 shows. But yeah, Jerry Springer. That's a crazy show. Anyhow, if you're not, it's The Boss. That's right, Matt. So we'll get cooking in a minute. So the question is, where are you from? And if you are a Jerry Springer fan or not, is the question, I guess. As some people mourn his death, and other people probably are. We got Uriah from Westminster, Colorado. Yes, all the 80s and 90s sitcom shows. New Jersey too. A Bruce fan, not a Springer fan. So Springsteen fan, not a Springer fan. I love that. That's fantastic. Orlando, John is not a fan. And Estorina from Connecticut. Fantastic. So where are you from? And are you a Springer fan? And if you want to throw in Springsteen fan, that's easy for me. That's easy for me.
That'll work too.
That'll work too. So we'll do that. And we'll get cooking. This is not a television reality show or musician show. We will be talking about artificial intelligence. And some people would think that maybe Springer was artificially intelligent. Different kind of artificial intelligence.
Born in the USA. Love it.
All right, born in the USA, he was. I love it. Not a fan of the show, but interesting guy. That would be true. That comes from Tim. And DC, remember when the show was more like Donahue, right? That was what it started out as, and then they started throwing chairs. So Illinois fan of almost everybody, Douglas is. Latif is not a fan. All right, so that is our icebreaker of the day for us is where you're from, and are you a Jerry Springer fan, and a Springer or a Springsteen fan? As it turns out, that was just a throw in from the last time we had our briefing, right, Jeff? You were asking.
Right. And I think we did get quite a few more Bruce Springsteen fan yeses than we got Springer fan.
Yeah, I would think.
Right on.
And for those of you who aren't Springsteen fans, you can leave. I'm just kidding. You can stay. We're not going to judge much. All right, we'll get cooking in just a second. When everybody get a chance to log in here, we want to welcome you here. And I tell you what, this is a really hot topic for everybody. We've done this a couple times now, and we love the interaction. We want to welcome all the folks. This is truly an interagency briefing. We love the fact that you guys are participating with us today. We know you got a lot of things you can do. So thanks for joining us. And taking a look at AI. It is a pretty hot topic, as I mentioned. You're not going to believe this, Jeff, but this is not endorsed by GSA or any other agency. GSA,
No way.
GSA makes us say it. It's for informational purposes only, and for you, the government. If you're participating in this, it's not an endorsement or commitment to purchase from any vendor. We love that because it's important that you get to be able to communicate, and it opens up the dialogue, and we love that. Speaking of dialogue, we love participation. Do not we, Matt?
That's right.
We love participation. So since there's a bunch of folks here, if you have a question or anything that you want to engage with, raise your hand. If you want to talk about weirdo stuff like Springsteen or Springer, put that in the chat. But if you want to talk about real stuff, raise your hand or put it in the Q&A. If you have something that you don't want everybody and their mother to talk about because there's an issue within your agency or something, send it to jeff.lanham@DivIHN, DivIHN.com. That information, you may want to take a screenshot of that because that's going to disappear in a few minutes. But if you have any dialogue that you would like, that's out of that. So here's what we asked. We did ask, this will be the best briefing ever if Will from the VA says it breaks down the sci-fi from the reality. Boy, oh boy, did we get some sci-fi. We will have some sci-fi and some reality, right, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
And Daniel from EPA addresses AI and government contract administration. Yes, sir. We will talk about how you can use it for that. Julie, how to protect myself in the future. That's a big deal, right? If I can explain it to someone easily, says Jennifer from the VA. And Jerry from the VA, I hear that AI will not take any jobs from any federal employees. What do you think of that one, Jeff?
I'm not going to commit to that one for sure, but we'll hope, right? We'll teach you how to use it better so you're protecting yourself.
Hey, how about that? Learn AI and hopefully will enhance my communication with veteran population I serve. Love that, Mary. Thank you for everybody from the VA. Shout out to you for sure. Super great mission that you guys have. Dave from FWS, Clarence from State, Tyler and Brian from the VA. They learn something, anything, Jeff. It'll be the best briefing ever if they just learn something.
I think we can be sure on that one.
There you go. And Jeff from FDA, it addresses biases in AI. There are some biases, and all that's one of the things that's been popping up. So I don't know how much you're going to go into that, but we will.
Got a whole section on the risk of this and what to do about it. So
all right, there you go. Love that. So and it also goes out. Presenters don't get caught up in the fun of ChatGPT. No fun for you.
we're gonna have a little bit of fun.
Little bit of fun. We have a little bit of fun, but then we'll get. Brett, stick around. We'll get to the focus on legally, ethically, securely leveraging it in GovOps. That's exactly what we're talking about, right?
We will get down to business. Yep.
But if we don't have a little bit of fun, then everybody goes into a coma, and that's no fun. All right. So, Anselin from FDA, the presentation panelists are in layman's terms and related to the work at FDA. It'll be government oriented, federal government oriented. We won't target FDA, but Anselin, if you would like to continue the conversation, I promise you'll have the opportunity to talk about FDA stuff as much as you want. Rose with the VA, if they have a live demo, we're doing a live demo, Jeff?
We are. Absolutely.
We are.
Big part.
Best briefing ever for Rose.
Sweet.
We met that one. Edward from FAA covers the dangers of AI and efforts to mitigate those dangers. We actually talked about that a little bit. So Edward, it'll be the best briefing ever for you too. And how would you say this? Cheyenne from VOA.
Shit.
Best practices in news media and releases. We'll talk a little bit about that. Anything that gets detailed like that. How did you say it, Matthew?
I thought it was Chen.
So, however, if we're screwing that up, we apologize.
Mm-hmm.
But we will. So we're not going to dive down into any particular agency per se, but we do have some good examples from HHS, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, several lists of what to watch out for and, how to use this technology responsibly and in a trustworthy manner is the goal.
That's it. And more than just ChatGPT, we'll talk more about it than that, but we'll be just demonstrating, right? You're demonstrating.
Yeah, so we're going to do the demo primarily on ChatGPT, but we will definitely talk about some of the other technology platforms. And, again, we can talk offline if there is interest in any of the rest of that stuff, because there's a ton of, great solutions available above and beyond what we're going to actually demonstrate today. But we hope to give you some tools to take away and go try it out. And, if you want to talk more, then we're happy to do so.
That's fantastic. Love it. All right. So that's the best briefing ever. And we ask this, you can pop this in the chat too. If you want us to address anything that's important to you. We want to do our best to hit it all. It'll be high level, but we'll dive down into a few things, and we want to make sure that you get the answers that you want. So Ramella is here. I just saw Ramella came up from the EEOC. Welcome, Ramella. She says AI is used in human capital and not just for hiring. Like that. Dion from State, are CEUs available? So the continuing education, yes. What we just let us know that you want one. We'll make sure you get a certificate. All you need is your supervisor to get a stamp of approval, and you are CEU'd. All right. So Tess says from CMS, is civilian government employees permitted to use AI tools for their work? If so, what to extent and what limitations are there? Talk a little bit about that, especially in HHS land. For you, Tess. Michael from the VA, Databricks and other mainstream AI or NLP. Wow, that's a lot of acronyms. We probably aren't going to dive too deep into that, Michael, but I promise that Jeff, you guys can do a Vulcan mind meld on that on your own.
Absolutely.
And Victoria from MCC, do AI programs spy on users? How would we never have any spying programs happening in anywhere? I don't know what the answer to that.
Well,
maybe
the answer is maybe, sort of, kind of, right? Because by default, especially ChatGPT will track the prompts that it gets and use that as it continues to learn. But I believe you can turn that off as well if you don't want it to track the history. So yes and no.
All right. Yes and no.
That was a
Jerry
good
from the
answer,
VA.
Jeff. That was a good answer. They're tracking it.
So, Jerry, does the Fed government see AI phenomenon as a slippery slope that will start taking jobs away from people? Will it cost any Fed jobs? We don't know, but you're not asking that question by mistake, right? All right. So FedRAMP, AI, ML tools. As far as I know, none of these are approved FedRAMP yet. Have you heard anything about that, Matt?
No, I haven't. I don't think they are.
I don't think so.
There is a big project where they hope to provide some resources. So not yet, but hopefully soon, I think, is what I would say there.
Yep, it's coming. All right. So how can it be applied to USDA and all the rest of those things? Yes, it can be. And we'll dive down a little bit. Ronnie from the VA, how do I identify fraudsters? Fraudsters using AI tools. Got like that. Steve, how to prepare a lot of training data? Yes, that's one of the areas you could probably glean from AI. How will AI ChatGPT improve implementation of environmental protection work? That'll be a great question, Lewis. Let's bring back that around at the end. Hillary, please address the topic that we're not going to go down this road, I don't think. ATT, ATX, LLM. Whew, that's intense. Hillary, we want to have a continued conversation because people will go into a coma if we start talking about that. Jessica, what are the privacy concerns? We'll talk a little about that. And FedRAMP, we already talked that. And NRC, what artificial intelligence is, including the upside and downside. Yes.
Perfect.
We'll get to a bunch of those, I think. I think we can. And just making sure we're getting everything. Brett wishes he could afford spring team tickets. That's right. It is expensive. I agree. And Latasha wants a CEU. We'll make sure you get that. And any issues, browser ChatGPT inside firewall at the VA. Don't know that yet, but we'll see what we can. And how do we access captioning? Great question. Hold on one sec. There's a way for you to be able to turn that on. More. If you go into the settings, it'll say more, 3 dots, captions, and show captions. How about that? Live stream transcript is now on. I did it. It is being recorded as well, which will help with the captions. So there you go. I think we did that, Jennifer. All right. So we do love participation. And the first part of the participation, why in the world did you decide to join us today? We have 82 people here right this minute. So are you in the hot seat for AI implementation? Are you trying to just get your head around this stuff? Did you want to be part of the dialogue, or your boss made you come? Somebody's got to be a Weisenheimer. And have you ever been to a Gov Brief session? Because that's the question. That's more of a selfish question for me and my team, but we always love to have folks back. And for you that have never experienced it before, welcome aboard, because we try to make things a little bit interesting, a little bit funny, a little bit engaging, right, Jeff?
That's right.
And we'll get to it. All right. So while you guys are answering that question, let's talk about DivIHN. Now, these characters, Matt is on the BD side and Jeff is on the implementation side. So these guys work with DivIHN. Matt, tell us a little bit about DivIHN and what you guys are all about and why you're here today.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to come. I know everyone's busy, so it's greatly appreciated. And Dave, thank you very much for hosting these because they are very informative. And I think, I get a lot out of them when I attend. So I hope that everyone that showed up today gets a lot out of this as well. So DivIHN Integration, we are actually a newly certified 8A firm, but we've been in business for over 20 years, mostly supporting commercial organizations. We do a lot of Salesforce design and implementation, enterprise architecture support, customized Microsoft application services, cybersecurity governance solutions, and some workforce solutions. We are supporting not only commercial, but since 2016, we've been working with the Department of Energy at Argonne National Laboratory. We've been supporting state and local, doing IT roadmaps, doing a little bit of fraud, waste, and abuse. And we're just looking to grow our federal footprint through partnerships and leveraging our commercial background, just trying to translate that into government success. Our core focus in life is transformation and success for our clients, coworkers, and all stakeholders. And we do that by positively impacting lives, one interaction at a time, and providing services with excellence and grace.
Love it. And
if you guys have any questions, reach out to me at any time. I'd love to talk to you.
That's great. Make sure you put your information in the chat so they can do
Certainly
that.
Will.
We'll make sure that. And I just did put the slides in there. And John says, I also want to stay ahead of my kids' knowledge about AI. Good luck with that one, John.
That's hard.
Good luck with that one, baby. That's a tough one, John. So yeah, the other part about DivIHN, we'll talk a little bit later. You guys are GSA contract holders as well as 8A. So we appreciate everything you do for the government as you do things for the government now. So I'm going to end this poll, and I usually don't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And the next poll is, where are you at in the process of exposure to this? Are you, wait a minute, what happened here? What am I doing? I'm going to stop sharing that. Gotta go back here. Come on, Dave. It's like the first time I've ever done this. So here it is. Have you ever heard, you never heard of this ChatGPT? I can't imagine this is true, but some of you may never heard of it. Look at that. Tried it some have never tried it some, use it regularly, or have experience in other AI solution. This is really interesting. I am very surprised at what I'm seeing so far. Are you guys seeing this? That almost half of the folks have never tried it or never heard of it. Over half. That's fantastic. So you guys are going to get a real treat today because it's some pretty fun stuff. And if you have any questions, all you have to do is remember, raise your hand, and there's the thing for chat and for Jeff. Okay, there's Matt. He popped that in there, and I'm just make sure we didn't miss anything.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, Dave, during the demo today, we're going to definitely provide value for people, even those that have used ChatGPT. We hope to show you some new things, some new tricks, some things you probably didn't know, so you can use it even more effectively.
Love it. But we have 67% either haven't heard of it or have never heard of it, never tried it. This is phenomenal. I love this. That doesn't get any better than that. I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're going to get you. Oh, by the way, you're going to take over here, Jeff. You ready?
I am ready.
All right. While you're doing that, I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share this poll out because guess what? This is fantastic. So 18% never heard of it, 48%. Wow. I've tried it some. So I'm really interested in the folks that are using it regularly too, because throw in on this, by the way, this is completely interactive. And I guess I got to give you the ability to share. Is that what it is? There you go, Jeff. Right, you got it. All right. So absolutely love that. Thanks for letting me know. We'll stop sharing that piece. All right. So Jeff, take us down this road for us for how this stuff works and what it is from the get-go. Take us to the agenda page. Let's take a look at that.
Sounds good. There we go.
Super. So tell us what we got here. We're gonna be looking at what AI is overall, right?
Absolutely, right. So this is a quick look at the agenda, as Dave said, and we're going to start with an introduction that provides some background on what AI is all about in general, and as well as how it relates to government work, right? We're going to then do some actual demonstrations that showcase the power and ease of use of some real world AI solutions. It is going to be ChatGPT and GPT-3 and 4, but we will allude to some other things as well. And then we'll wrap it up with a brief look at, what we call the darker side of AI, right? So, why there are some risks with this technology, obviously. And then some final thoughts on how you can start utilizing this amazing new technology in your everyday lives safely and responsibly.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, so let's start, with a brief review of this summary of the enterprise AI strategy that's from the Department of Health and Human Services. I think there are some other similar ones across some other agencies as well. But in this case, it states that HHS should endeavor to leverage AI to solve previously unsolvable problems, lead advances in health and well-being, and generally embrace the use of AI in a trustworthy manner, right? It speaks to developing an AI-ready workforce, encouraging research and innovation in the health space especially, and ensuring safe, secure, and ethical use of artificial intelligence technologies, something that we should all pay attention to. And, to me, this really means that, you should all be able to take what you learned today and apply it immediately in your daily work. We have not heard of any reasons you can't use some ChatGPT and other things like that, but, obviously no promises, no guarantees. Here is an overview of some of the recent legislation that relates to the use of AI in the federal space. And as you can see, there are a number of significant bills that deal with AI, either directly or indirectly. The main objective that span all of these really is that they speak to the whole purpose of our presentation today, embracing AI in a holistic way while being mindful of the risks and threats that it can engender. Clearly, there's substantial interest in AI in the government space and no small amount of money implementing and engaging with these kinds of solutions. And in fact, an even more obvious example of the efforts of the government in embracing and expanding on the smart and safe use of AI is in the National AI Research Resource Task Force. So this is a group that was formed in 2020, and recently, just in January, actually, they completed the effort of defining the roadmap for implementation of a national resource for AI research. Work's expected to continue in developing this resource and expanding its reach and utilization. And you can check out the orange link on this slide there at the bottom to see the full report from this team and more information about the rollout plans going forward from here. It's actually quite informative. So before we get into too much more detail here, and certainly before we do some show and tell, let's start with the good old definition of terms for some of the most important concepts here. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is the widest, broadest term here. It includes all the types of technologies that attempt to emulate aspects of human cognition. Machine learning is a subset of AI that uses vast amounts of data and information to train a digital model of reality that can then be used to, query and to provide information for a variety of purposes. And deep learning is an even narrower term that applies to complex learning models with multiple layers of artificial neural networks and usually a lot of training data, right? And this is what ChatGPT and some of the other headline-friendly modern AI tools are using. It's specifically called natural language models as well, right? So some of the bullet points on the right there give you a little bit more detail, some of the subsets and types of each of those categories. But hopefully that kind of gives a quick introduction to some of the main terminology that you'll hear around AI. This is a colorful diagram that I really like a lot because it shows the high-level relationships between the various knowledge domains of mathematics, data, and computer science. To varying extents, they all play crucial roles in the development and application of artificial intelligence solutions. Statistics in particular is very important in machine learning as it provides the framework for understanding and evaluating the performance of machine learning models. Computer science, AI is related to fields such as machine learning, computer vision, natural language processing, and robotics, which all involve using algorithms to process and analyze large amounts of data, learn and interpret the patterns in that data, and then make predictions or decisions or completions in some cases that we'll talk about based on that model. I think this picture does a good job of kind of highlighting some of the areas of huge potential value that live in the intersections between statistical mathematics, computer science, and big data. Lots of new tools, products, technologies, but this kind of gives you an overall perspective on how all these sciences and applicable areas apply, right?
Yeah. And real quick, go back real quick.
Sure.
So a lot of times when I've talked a lot about data research and data, good data versus bad data, and being able to sift through the mounds of data that government agencies have. And I love the way that this kind of builds it out to say, okay, the data mining piece and making that data useful, because there's a lot of data that each agency has that isn't really useful because it's not in an organized format. Is that what this is able to do, or being able to rely on AI to deliver some of that cleansing of data?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge use case, right? Both interpreting giant piles of data that is often unstructured and that hasn't been massaged and made into something more useful, but it's also the foundation for, many other types of solutions, everything from generating images and generating text to computer vision and cars and, all that kind of stuff. And actually, we'll see some more examples in the next couple slides.
Love it. Appreciate that.
Yeah, actually, that was a really good question. So now let's talk a little bit. I think this is really interesting, but of course, I'm kind of an AI nerd, obviously, but the history of artificial intelligence can be traced back all the way to ancient Greece, where myths and legends portrayed robots and automatons as intelligent beings, right? Also sci-fi. Early computing efforts by pioneers such as Blaise Pascal, Charles Babbage, Ada Lovelace, and others set the stage for all the advancements we've seen since then. However, the modern field of AI, as we know it today, really began to take shape in the mid-20th century with the development of digital computers. In 1950, the question of how to determine whether a machine was, quote, intelligent or not was answered by Alan Turing in a way that we still use to this day, which is called the Turing test. And it asks, does the system exhibit intelligent behavior equivalent to or indistinguishable from that of a human? So can it trick another human into thinking that it's a human is basically the gist of this. And that, even to this day, it's not the test anymore. Obviously, it's got more sophisticated, but still core to how intelligent, quote, is something. One of the earliest efforts to seem human came in the form of the first chatbot, which was called ELIZA. ELIZA is a program that parsed input provided by the user, applied a relatively simple set of rules to that input, and responded with a text output that attempted to mimic a person-centered psychotherapist. While it was rudimentary by current standards, it was compelling enough to create quite the buzz back in the day. And in fact, on a personal note, my own very first exposure to computers was when I first saw ELIZA running on an old Radio Shack TRS-80 in my elementary school. I was instantly hooked on computers, and that began my lifelong passion for an eventual career in computer science, and obviously still continues to this day. So we'll actually take a closer look at that in the demo, because I think that's pretty cool. But despite all the hype that surrounded artificial intelligence throughout its history, or maybe even perhaps because of all that hype, there have been several periods of decreased interest in artificial intelligence research that have been called AI winters. During these periods, in the 80s and early 90s especially, and again in the mid-2000s, funding for AI research dried up, and many AI projects were canceled or scaled back just because there was the perception that AI was overpromising and under-delivering. And I think that's really continued right on through to today, and only with the recent release of these large language models like ChatGPT is it really kind of beginning to get traction with the broader population. I think, Dave, the fact that, not everybody has tried ChatGPT, but only 20-25% of people haven't at least heard of it at this point, which I think that's something that's pretty different from some of the main inflection points we've had in the past.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
And Joni is saying potentially incredible potential for visa passport fraud investigations. That is true.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great use case as well. But so, kind of continuing on here, let's wrap this up, right? Despite all the hype that surrounded AI throughout its history, sorry, I said that part already. AI has experienced, periods of rapid growth and progress that have been driven by the development of more advanced algorithms and some, key milestones, in the history here. And one of the most visible was the first time a chess program could beat an actual human master, right? And even more recently, and that was in 1987 when Deep Blue from IBM first beat Gary Kasparov, and boy, Mr. Kasparov was pretty unhappy about that. But even since then, there's been leaps in the ability of machines to do things that previously only humans can do, and even especially winning ever more challenging games like chess, Jeopardy, Go, and even more recently diplomacy, which is a game where you have to, there's no chance-based thing. It's you have to negotiate with other players in real time and make deals, kind of like Monopoly, only a little even more complicated than that. And so the computer has to be able to speak to a human and basically be taken for a human in order to win at the game of diplomacy. And then other things like the Roomba robot, and when Watson beat Jeopardy champion, and of course I mentioned AlphaGo as well. So all these things really have been the most visible milestones as AI has grown, but obviously there's also applicability to the role of business and things as well. And it's obviously come a long way since the days of Eliza.
I got to tell you, the Roomba robot thing, my son got that for us for the house for Christmas one year, and I'm telling you what, that is a cool thing.
You big fan?
Big fan. Big fan.
Nice.
It's got weirdo things, right? I'm sure the Chinese are spying all over us, but there you go.
So yeah, absolutely, right. But now we got the history and the background behind us. Let's take a little closer look at the future, right? So the hype cycle in general, right, not just for AI, but in general, is a model developed by Gartner, one of the largest consulting firms, that can be used to describe the typical pattern of the adoption and expectations surrounding new technologies and innovations. It's been widely adopted as a way to understand the stages of development and commercialization of new technologies. In this case, we're focusing on artificial intelligence that are characterized by the 5 stages that we'll go into in a second, right? So
I think this is a really cool graph too, because you can see where you have the hype and then you have the delivery of those things. And we see this a lot. Not that there's anything else in the government that they hype up or any vendors hype up and then don't quite deliver. Just saying, might happen every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And the shape of this curve generally remains the same, but where all these individual points are on their development and on their hype life cycle, right? Hype cycle tells you really a lot about, how mature they are and how mainstream and ready for adoption. Things like autonomous vehicles are pretty far along here. Obviously, they're not all the way there yet, but they're closer than a lot of these other technologies as well. So we can see many of these things are still in the innovation trigger stage, which means they're in the earliest phases of development, and the potential applications and benefits aren't even well understood yet, right? One of the most obvious or important ones here is called artificial general intelligence, which has basically always been the holy grail of AI. And it refers to the ability of an intelligent agent to understand or learn basically any intellectual task that a human being can. And that's still, fortunately, still in its infancy. So, the Terminators aren't coming to get us quite yet, but, that would be the technology that leads to that sort of thing eventually. Generative AI, which we will focus on during the demo today, is shown here on the edge of the inflated expectations, right? I think it's probably even since this graph was developed in mid 2022, so less than a year ago. Some of these things, and especially generative AI, has moved quite a bit farther along, I think, even since then. It'll be interesting to see when Gartner puts out their version of this for 23, how far some of these things have moved along. Several key technologies like natural language processing and deep learning fall into the trough of disillusionment phase, where the hype begins to die down and reality starts to set in. And many of the early applications of the technology, do not meet expectations. And they're thus, the funding dries up and the development slows down and all those sorts of things. A few current technologies like computer vision are mature enough to have reached the later stages, and where technologies mature and reach widespread adoption, and things like, as I mentioned, autonomous vehicles are becoming more and more real all the time, and computer vision with cameras and laser distance measuring and other things, onboard sensors that are then fed into a computer to figure out the environment and map the next behaviors is all part of that sort of thing. And so, I'd anticipate that many of these things are well on their way to, accelerating their journeys into the plateau of productivity, which I think some of these things are probably getting on their way to that, even as we speak. So now that we've laid a solid foundation for kind of understanding the concepts and, the history and what's what here, let's go a little further into, what the hype's all really about. So the next couple of slides here, we're going to talk about some various and different perspectives on areas where AI technology can be most useful today or soon in the context of both business and especially in the government space. This slide lists some of the most common use cases we see in the real world these days. While some of these items do require non-trivial investments in technology and specific solutions, many of them can be implemented with readily available pre-trained models that need no prior investments, like ChatGPT, right? And as we've mentioned, we'll show you a few of these examples in action in a little bit here. And I'd expect everyone in the audience here today to find at least an item or two on this list where you'll see the potential value in addressing real needs and streamlining repetitive tasks with AI-based solutions.
And I will call out a couple of those too, if you don't mind. Some of the IGs that I've talked with are in the auditing, compliance, discovery components that we have there. Some folks here with HR dealing with resume analysis, all those types of functions that make it difficult for a human being to do it all the time, but needs to have some smarts behind it to find trends. We did some work with the post office. Geez, that was probably the post office IG back five years ago or so, talking about that exact thing, looking at trends. So being able to identify trends of problems with mail carriers and things like that. It's really, it's incredible what the potential is here. And that's why I think everybody's here, right? That's
absolutely right. I think one of the things we're seeing a lot of, activity and interest in is some things like anomaly detection. So you expect certain things to happen periodically, and what if they don't, right? It's easy to detect when something happens that was unexpected, but harder to predict when something was expected but did not happen. So that's another thing that there's quite a bit of value in.
Yeah, and finding those outliers, right? That's a lot of times that's where being able to find problems with fraud deals with the outliers.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think somebody mentioned that in the the things that they're looking for today. So absolutely. So here's another look at some of the most compelling uses of artificial intelligence across multiple domains. And this one is about, how much revenue has come from these kinds of solutions and products in the world. So these are, real world scenarios that are happening right now, and, which are generating the most economic activity, I guess, is a way to look at this. And of course, the leading entry by a significant margin is object detection and avoidance. And this can apply to everything from industrial robots to autonomous vehicles to robot vacuum cleaners, right? Mm-hmm. So given the huge investment in self-driving vehicles, it's not a big surprise to learn that this item tops the list. Next is image recognition and classification. So this also covers a pretty wide range of things, including face scanners that unlock your smartphone, or airport facial ID, police license plate scanners and, other things like that. And I'm sure there's more usage and more uses in the government space as well that are not as well publicized.
That's what Joni was talking about with visa and passports. And if you've done any international travel, there's this. When we went to the UK, we walked right up and it compared me to my passport. I never had to talk to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Crazy.
And all the rest of these entries cover a variety of other common data processing tasks, which are specific examples of some items that, we saw in the last slide. And basically all of this represents innovative uses of computers to, do things that humans don't like to do or don't want to do, or in some cases are risky or dangerous as well, right?
Yep.
Also, we've seen a lot of value and actually done some projects ourselves in the realm of medical image analysis and, helping doctors make better diagnosis and recognize signs of trouble earlier and, those kinds of things as well. Finally, we have an overview of some of the AI use cases here that's specifically relevant in government space. And of course, some of the most controversial potential uses fall into this area, such as autonomous weapon systems and automated decision systems, right? We'll talk a little bit more about the darker side of AI later in the presentation here today, but suffice it to say that there are good reasons that a lot of the science fiction and end of the world type movies out there have been made to explore this kind of thing, right? And some of my personal favorites coming back to sci-fi or, Terminator, RoboCop, The Matrix, Ex Machina, and even things like Wall-E speak to this, right?
Yeah.
Even Disney films are tackling these topics these days, right? Fortunately, there's plenty of less threatening uses of AI in the government, and hopefully you will all focus on them and not some of the other ones as we go forth here, right? All right, and so getting done with the slides here, I'm going to get to the demo next, right? But before we do, just wanted to touch on a couple things. Obviously these fields, AI, ML, other things have advanced rapidly in recent years, and there's a wide variety and quickly growing range of tools, products, platforms, libraries, pre-trained models, and other, components and things that are available for creating solutions based on AI and ML. Virtually all the major players in the technology sector have made huge investments. We're talking many billions of dollars, right? Microsoft alone has put like 12 or 13 billion dollars into, OpenAI and more, right? Microsoft, Salesforce has also invested heavily, Google and Amazon, obviously, Meta, IBM, some others. So some of the most interesting solutions do require some investment in some of these products, right? But fortunately, there's also quite a few freely available tools for many environments that can enable exploration of data, and the creation of AI and ML solutions with little or no investment required. And there's even pre-trained models and things, like we've said, ChatGPT, these things at the bottom here that are readily available right now that you can start using in your everyday work, even as, you or we or the government looks to, some more specific and concrete, implementations of this. So let's get on to the demo, shall we? I'm gonna shut down my slideshow here. And so let's start with actually some show and tell about ELIZA, right? So I mentioned that ELIZA was the very first chatbot developed in the mid to late 60s. And it was one of the first things trying to, emulate a human and try to pretend to be human. So let's just kind of give you a quick sample of what it was like back in the day and what the capabilities of the first chatbot are. So let's start just the conversation here. And since, this thing is kind of pretending to be a Rogerian, in the style of Roger in terms of psychology history, right? Trying to be a therapist that basically mirrors the questions back to, the patient and encourages and leads them into kind of discovering for themselves, what their issues are or how to proceed. So, hello, can we talk? Hello, what would you like to discuss? Eliza says back. Well, I'm not feeling so good. So, how can you help, basically, right? How long have I not feeling so good? Well, a while, I guess, right? Tell me more. A lot of depressing news in the world these days, right? I mean, Jerry Springer just died, I'm pretty bummed myself. quite interesting. Okay, so not very useful response, but again, it's not really breaking character at this point, but it's also not giving us a ton that's very interesting. Maybe I need someone to talk to. You aren't sure? You're not very helpful, are you? So now it's breaking down, right? So
And there it goes.
for us to kind of confuse the poor thing, and it's not really providing much.
Ingo, we're going to get to your comment, and Matt says, "Where's the singularity?" I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't have a lot of time, so we're going to try to get through this stuff, right? So
Thomas says,
let's try to do some of that same thing.
Go ahead.
GPT and see what its responses are, right? Hopefully it'll be a little more constructive. Hello, of course we can talk. I'm here to help. Pretty friendly, right? All right, let's tell it where we're at. Not feeling so good. Oh, sorry to hear that. Then comes the disclaimer, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist, so don't believe anything I say is what's between the lines here, but
written by the lawyers.
Solution.
Written by the lawyers.
Absolutely. Right. A lot of depressing news in the world these days, right? So, what we're going to see here, and I won't go too deep, right? But ChatGPT is both going to be more human-like in its responses by orders of magnitude. And ultimately, since I'm, kind of suggesting that I need some help, it's going to, kind of go out of its way to cheer me up and, ultimately provide some resources at the end of the day. If I keep going down this thing, it's going to say, I can tell it, maybe I just need somebody to talk to again. Wrong one. Well, hey, I'm here for you. And oh, by the way, it's going to probably give me some referrals to, actual therapists and things like that. So, once again, a lot more useful here, a lot more lifelike. This goes a lot further in passing the Turing test than, poor old Eliza.
I find it interesting that it actually typed it out as if it was a human being, because it could have hit that like bam, right? But it decided to make it.
So that speaks to how this works and what's going on behind the scenes here.
Very cool.
I'm going to touch on that in just a sec, Dave, and kind of, parse that a little bit further. So, but before we do that, let's get into so that was kind of fun, right? Kind of interesting, kind of gives you a comparative to how far these models have come these days. But let's do something a little bit more, real world and a little more business-like. So I'm going to bring up a resume here, and this is just a sample resume. Actually, it's a sample from a resume writing company, so it isn't even a real person. But I'm about to go into an interview here, and I don't want to spend a ton of time preparing. Now, this isn't a very long, resumes, so I could probably read it, but some of them get pretty long these days, right? I mean, I often run into 10, 12 page resumes and even longer. So let's see what ChatGPT can do to help us make some sense of this. So analyze and summarize this resume, please, right? And I'm going to paste in the text of the resume into ChatGPT here, and it's going to start churning and going to start to provide me a response that summarizes this resume and hopefully, pulls out the most interesting aspects without me having to read it all word for word. So it's going to, kind of summarize what it's learned. It's going to give me some bullet points, much shorter than the actual resume. And at the end of all this, it's going to kind of give me its opinion on whether this particular resume qualifies for the job of a software developer in this case or not, right? So maybe we're doing some ChatGPT here and we want to, do more with it, but hey, we're not programmers. So, could it help us find a programmer maybe? And the answer is sure. It can definitely summarize and help kind of, take large text and break it down and summarize it in an easier way. And so, I've used this for articles. I've used this for all kinds of stuff. And you can even tell it, summarize this at the level of a fifth grader, or you can give it more directions that will control how it spits out this output.
And is this 3.5 or 4 ChatGPT?
This is ChatGPT 4, right? So the newest, latest, greatest in this particular case. So
we got a couple comments real quick. Karen's being a smart aleck. It's always worth remembering human psychology hasn't changed much since the Mechanical Turk.
That's true. Fortunately, treatments have gotten better.
And Brian says it's very interesting. His field is actually counseling. It's something that I anticipated would happen at some point, AI therapist. So Brian, you were wondering about whether there's job security?
Yeah, right on.
There's always room for human beings.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So that kind of gives you the gist here of kind of how it can summarize text and save you time. And again, this is the next couple of things here you can go use, in your own daily work. And I use these things for similar things pretty frequently as well. So this is ChatGPT 4. So when you go into ChatGPT, this is the most current common engine.
And can it speak?
It cannot. Now, there are tools that can turn text into language and do a much better job of, text to speech than in the past, and speech to text as well. But that's not a function of ChatGPT in particular here.
Not yet, anyway, Craig.
Not yet, exactly.
Won't be long. It'll be talking for you.
Won't be too long at all. You're totally right. So now let's say, okay, so you know what? We've now done some ChatGPT. We want to do some more, but we don't know how. We tried to hire a developer. But let's say we want to present a proposal, and now we need to do some brainstorming around how can we, provide and develop a proposal, let's say to the government for how to do more with AI, right? So this is another variation of the OpenAI. So this is not ChatGPT, but this is the engines behind ChatGPT. They're not quite as sophisticated, but they do give you some additional controls on the right here, right? So I don't have time to go into the details here, but basically you can choose, one of several different modes. We're going to stick with complete. You can choose a model, and there's different models that are optimized for different behaviors and different purposes, and some other settings that control how it generates the output, right? The two most important ones are the maximum length, which is how long of an output will it give you, and the temperature. The temperature controls the randomness of how this works. If you set it all the way down to 0, it's going to give you the same answer every time to the same prompt. If you crank it all the way up to 1, it's going to be a lot more random with how it works. So I'm going to turn on a thing here called show probabilities, and we're going to go ahead and do our next prompt, which says write an introduction to a proposal for the federal government to invest in AI technologies. And when we tell it to process that, we can see, Dave, back to your question, it's going to do this one word at a time. And what's actually going on here is it's generating each word on the fly and picking from all the words that might go next based on the probabilities of each word. And these are color highlighted based on the probabilities of the words. So since my temperature is at 0 here, if I say, do this again, if I delete that text, the federal government has an opportunity, blah, 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 and I do it again, it's going to give me back the exact same response, right? But if I turn this temperature up to the maximum and I say, okay, let's try again, let's delete that, submit that again, and it's going to give me a whole different answer this time. And it's going to pick different words, and it's going to be less rigid in how it chooses probabilistically which word is next. So that's both how it works behind the scenes a little bit and why it generates a word at a time, Dave, even when you're using ChatGPT, the main.
And this is it's called the playground. So this gives you the ability to just throw something in there, and then it tells you the response.
Exactly, right? And there's, again, different capabilities and things like that, but the gist is, there's a little more, this is not quite as sophisticated of an engine and a model as the full ChatGPT 4, but it gives you some more granularity and ability to control the output. And I'll show you why this is important in the next step, actually. So let's say now we wanted to use this, right? But we wanted to do several different things, or, oops, wrong one. Let's say we wanted to be able to, automate this and do this more quickly. So how could we do that? So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back up here. Let's put in a prompt that says, write me a program, right? Oops, hold on.
This is crazy.
So, I'm not a programmer. We just tried to hire a programmer to try to do some of this, but let's see if it can help us. So it says, I tell it to write a prompt. Oops, except that I did this wrong. I have to pick GPT-4. Let's do that again. Right. So it's going to go ahead and give me some code. And while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and bring up an editor here.
So if anybody's wondering whether Jeff's a computer nerd, there you go.
This is your evidence, right?
Yeah, this is evidence. And Danielle's asking, any specifications on the probabilities that correlate to temperature equals 1?
yeah, they don't really publish exactly how that works other than to give you some variation on what it is, right? So
there you go, Craig. What do you think of that? He says,
it's not generating here. So you know what? We're short on time, so I can't actually, I'm going to cut off, kind of actually going through this. The gist of this here is that this is an almost working script. There's 2 or 3 things you have to change. We have to put in an API key. We have to adjust this just a little bit here, and then we have to, control how many tokens output we want. But we can also even change the temperature right in this script. And at the end of this, if I run this in PowerShell, it's going to give me back the answer to the question. So great stuff here. It's again, if you want to try this and you can't figure it out on your own, we can take it offline and show you how. But since we're running short on time here, we're going to kind of circle back and try to wrap things up.
that is crazy.
All right.
So for those of us who are not programmers and don't know what that was, suffice it to say that it, as opposed to just Googling to try to figure out what the answer would be, this will actually help you write the code. It's
exactly, right.
And it really does a great job.
Yeah, it's getting better and better at it. It doesn't quite do everything yet. You still need a programmer that knows something to figure out why it didn't work and correct it, but it's getting much closer and much better, and more and more to come. So we saw some of the amazing abilities that large language models can offer here, including chat, brainstorming, summarization, and code generation. Of course, that's only scratching the surface of some of the other types of solutions that we talked about. Quick points about ChatGPT. The most important thing here, these are basically, again, this is the disclaimer saying, what, you shouldn't trust it. It might lie to you. It's going to, not give you straight answers when you try to ask it tricky questions. And it, doesn't know anything about the world after 2021. So keep in mind, again, it's not perfect. Don't be fooled by the fact that it is pretty darn lifelike, but there are still significant limitations and risks. And so as we, before we drill it a little bit further here, this slide is just a quick viewpoint of many of the examples, right? I mean, how ChatGPT and OpenAI works is all based on the prompts that you give it. That's kind of how you program these engines. And these are all examples, ready to use examples in ChatGPT, where you can go try out all these many different use cases and uses of this kind of a AI model. So great stuff here. I encourage y'all to explore this. I'm certain, once again, that everybody can find something that will help them in what they do, a little to a lot, but, what are the caveats, right? So what's easy, what's hard? Quick list here. Again, I won't go into too much detail, but, they can make repetitive things easy. They can give you good content, as a starting point or a rough draft. I strongly encourage everybody to not rely on it exclusively. In other words, proofread and wordsmith and, make your own what the output is, because it's pretty bland, it's pretty vanilla in many cases, right? And so anything that needs creativity still requires, human imagination, basically, because that's one thing that the AI doesn't have. On the other hand, some of the things, when you do want to develop more involved in interesting types of AI solutions, there's challenges to that as well. How much training data you have, what types of models and how to build them, specialized knowledge, data science is really what a lot of this is about. So a lot you can do with the out-of-the-box tools, a whole lot more you can do with some know-how. And again, that's not a thing where anybody on the audience here probably does this on your own, but if you're interested in what these possibilities are, again, we can take that offline and talk some more. So real quick here, a couple different ways of looking at, again, I've mentioned the darker side. So the issues related to training data and other things like that, but the list here represents a wide variety of concerns and range of impact levels that kind of go along with the various different risks and threats and areas of concern related to AI solutions in general. A lot of these things are a pretty big deal, and in many cases limit the usefulness and questionable output of some of these solutions. So can't really ignore these things. It's important to understand that with all that great power, there's risks and things that you should be mindful of and pay attention to when you're using the output of this. And the most important thing is just don't be transparent about the usage. Don't pretend that something it generated is your own. There was actually just a court case saying that an invention made by an AI was not patentable to the person that coached the AI, right? So there's IP, there's legal issues in some of this stuff that are yet to be explored. So just be aware of that. In terms of how to deal with that, there's, several frameworks. I tend to like this one from Deloitte called their Trustworthy AI Framework that basically calls out these 6 major factors to consider and to pay attention to, and to test and evaluate AI models in all of these things, before deploying them or before relying on the output, right?
Hey, Jeff, real quick, I'm going to launch this next poll because we're going to talk about continuing the conversation in just a minute. And there's folks that do have to jump. So if you have to jump and you want to continue the conversation with your agency, let us know, and we'll make sure that Jeff and his team can coordinate with you to dive into specifics of what you need from an agency. Just want to make sure we had that up and running. So you can keep on cooking, because I know folks are going to have to bounce out of here in about 30 seconds. So go ahead.
2 more slides and we're done, right? So basically, this is another way to look at this. This is a code of ethics that many folks in the research and development of AI technologies have agreed to. And, in each of these areas of research, ethics and values and long-term issues, these are some of the main areas where there is some guidance and some, how do you do this safely and securely? So a lot of work being done around how to address the risks, concerns, and issues on those previous pages. But again, just wanted to emphasize, when you're doing this yourself, when you're using ChatGPT, be aware of the fact that you can't always trust everything it says, and, just be mindful of that. So in conclusion, right? So right before the finish line here, it's been a roller coaster ride, and I'm approaching the final station here. Hopefully, this has made sense and has provided some value to folks. We've covered a lot of ground around AI, machine learning, many of the ways and means that it can be used. Of course, there's even more compelling value propositions when you go a little bit further down the path here. Again, strongly encourage everybody to go give ChatGPT and the other competitors, this is even being built into a lot of Microsoft and other everyday applications these days. Go try this, right? I mean, not much harm in trying it. You don't even have to sign up for it to give it a go. If you do want to use it more regularly and reliably, for $20 a month, you can subscribe to OpenAI and have, much less limited access to it. But, give it a try and explore on your own. And I'm sure you'll find some great uses for it, and might open the door to some other ideas or some thoughts or opportunities to do something more impactful.
This is a great idea. Joni just threw in there, ask ChatGPT to cite its sources after producing a text. Very cool.
Well, yeah, it will not do that in some cases because it's programmed to kind of hide and, basically anonymize some of that sort of stuff. But hey, try it, see what happens. It might, and in some cases that could be very useful. So absolutely give that a try.
Love it. That's a great idea, Joni.
Definitely. So that's it. Back to you, man.
All right, back to me. So I will go back to, we are sharing this poll right now, so we'll keep that open for just a minute. We will get to some questions. If you got a couple of minutes to stick around, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll make sure that you are in, get the follow-up. You will get a recap email with the presentation, a link to the video, and one-on-one meetings so that you guys can catch up with these guys. I'll make sure you have this, and we're going to get right to the final questions here. We have a couple from Jeff hey, appreciate the claps. Love it. Jeff says, is XAI live yet? I don't know what that means. X.AI. So Jeff, maybe you can tell us what X.JI is.
The new one.
Oh, it's Elon's AI.
Oh, right. No, not yet.
Not yet. So if AI, so Armando
originally, but sold out of it. So
Armando if AI learns how to respond on the fly, how will we ensure that we comply with clear and concise Content Act? Great question, Armando. And that is the $1 million question or more. That's probably a $1 billion question.
Yeah, and at this point, that's up to the humans, right? But there's also work being done to kind of maintain the guardrails of this technology so it doesn't wander off the path too far. And I think it's not quite there yet, but it's on the way.
Wanda has the best comment I've ever had.
Wanda, thank you.
You guys are 3 cool dudes. 3 cool dudes. That's
so nerdy. It's wrapped back around to being cool, right?
That's right. And then Aaron says, is the resume that you asked ChatGPT to analyze now part of its corpus? Is that?
No,
I guess
actually, that was just a kind of a random sample that I picked up. That it's not even a real resume, but just to kind of give you a sense and an idea of how it can, summarize something like that.
Yep. So I think as part of what I've come to understand is it incorporates whatever it does history on. So and
So there's a set amount of data, and actually the prior, I don't know as much detail about GPT-4 that's fairly recent, but GPT 3.5 was built on, they ended the training data in 2021. So specifically, it does not know about anything that happened in 2022 or later, and that's intentional, right? So
yeah,
they'll continue to bring that gap in closer, but it's important to understand that it's not.
I will say this. So those of you who are also geeks, my son is a propeller head as well, and he watches Linus Tech Tips, and he did it live on something that he just released that day, and he had access obviously to the latest and greatest because he's an influencer, right? And it drilled down using images to drill down on a sweatsuit that he released that day and found matches for the sweatsuit, going through all the rest of the things to say, okay, if you want to wear this top, you can wear these pants. It was crazy how awesome that was.
Yeah, I think it does, again, as I said, it does, keep the data and use the data that it gets. And I think somebody just asked here, if you put in your full resume, I think you couldn't be sure that it wouldn't keep the whole thing. Like I said, unless you turn off the, tracking the history thing, I do believe that will prevent it from doing that. But to your point, Dave, it does, some things it does take input on, but like news and headlines and world events and things like that is kind of off, they've left the recent stuff off limits so that it doesn't get into too much trouble. But
yeah,
so some things come through, current, and others don't, I guess is the easier way to say that.
And Ingo's talking about Samsung engineers were accidentally leaking trade secrets by using ChatGPT to debug their code. So that creates some holes, right? And a lot of these things we don't even know because we don't know what holes we're creating because it's never been explored before. And we're all in the same boat, right? Right, Jeff?
Yeah.
And as we try this. And do you recommend using a VPN? I don't think it matters a bit, John, if you use a VPN or not.
Yeah, because I mean, that would secure what you're sending to ChatGPT and not let somebody snoop on the traffic, but it wouldn't prevent ChatGPT from saving whatever input you gave it. Like I said, unless you, like, it's a very new feature. I think just within like the last couple of weeks, the feature that lets you turn off the history, which, prevents it from saving what you're telling it. But, obviously before that, it's saving everything. So.
And there's a big thing in there, chat. If you guys want to save the chat, I'll tell you how to do this. I think you can anyway. Maybe you can. If not, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to save the chat and make sure everybody gets a copy of it because there's a lot of great information from Jeff there and some others just from comments in there. We'll make sure everybody gets a copy of that bad boy. And we know we went over by a couple minutes. Hopefully it was great for everybody. Reach out to Jeff. Reach out to Matt if you want to know a little bit more. I'm going to shut this down. We got 10 folks that want to continue the conversation in some form or fashion. And if you want to talk to them directly, you can. Phone numbers, email addresses, and these are real human beings, not ChatGPT or any other form of AI. They're just regular humans. And I'll tell you, you can determine for yourself if they have advanced intelligence or whether they're just average when you talk to them. There you go, Matt. How you like that setup for being advanced or average intelligence in human beings? There you go. And I muted you, by the way. You're mutified. But we'll get everybody out of here. Where did Matt's hair go? That's a great question, John.
I don't know. Ask ChatGPT.
So John Schaefer apparently must know Matt a little bit.
That's sad. I cry about it every day.
I think he's trying to tell Matt he needs a newer profile pic.
Now some people can actually sport that look. If I did that, I don't have the Bruce Willis genes, man. I can't do it. But you do it. You pull it off.
I'm wearing the same tie as I was wearing that day like 10 years ago. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
So there you go. For those of
I only have one tie. Now you know the secret.
That's right. That's it, man. That's all you get. All right, great, guys. Thanks. That's what John says. He said he only has one as well. So, all right, guys, we'll get you out. Oh, we do have a couple of questions here. I'm sorry, I missed it in the Q&A. Aaron is saying, will ALAS or blind AI prevent malicious access to data? Great questions.
I wouldn't be sure of that just yet. So, I mean,
I don't believe there's any way to prevent actual I'm from the other side in dealing with data breach remediation and all the rest of that stuff, and people getting into stuff. If they want to get into it, they're going to figure out a way to do it. That's the way I
think that's definitely an area where there's more development needed from the AI engines themselves to prevent that sort of stuff, right? So there's definitely needs a multi-pronged approach to deal with that stuff.
Yep. And if you ask for CEUs, they'll get you a cert that you can take to your supervisor. All you need is supervisor approval, and you will get it. We'll get those out for you as well. Thank you very much, James, for that. Anybody else got any last minute questions? We got one from Vaughn. Are each iteration of ChatGPT separate or self-standing? Great question. Therefore, if it only
So I
learns
think
from that.
the question there is it only learning from your stuff for you? The answer is no. They aggregate all of the input and kind of throw it into my understanding, again, I'm not an open AI engineer, but my understanding is that they take all the data that it gets, they throw it into a big pile, they feed it on through, and it keeps learning from that stuff. So it's not specific. Now you can, actually, this is an important point too, you can develop your own custom version of ChatGPT where you do use your own data and it is private to you, but that's not the same thing you see through the web interface that we just looked at. So it's possible, but it's a little harder.
Something tells me there may be some monetary exchange for that one.
Yes, I think that's true.
I would think so. Hey, Jeff, I knew you were going to rock it. Rockstar, Jeff, Lanham here, and Matt, if you need to reach out to these guys, they're available to you. Thanks for joining us. Great information. Awesome as usual. And we'll keep the conversation going. And I appreciate you guys joining us from all the different agencies. Love the fact that there's a lot of interest in this.
Yeah.
Thank you, fellas. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.